So,
right.
What's up, everyone? Hope everyone is well. We're just going to, before I even introduce, well, many of you will know who you're looking at right now. But before we kind of really introduce and get started, we're gonna test the connection and make sure you can hear us and we're not echoing and everything else. So stand by as always. And it always gives a minute for people to be able to jump on if they want to. So, and it said that I can actually mute the staging area. Let me see this. It says I can actually mute your line, which would be fantastic, but I don't see where I can do that. Go solo. What does that mean? Oh no, I don't want to go solo. I want to keep you there.
Han Solo.
I'm still trying to learn this technology, and it's a good lesson. Like, I was so afraid of doing this, and just gonna, before I introduce, yep, it's working. What's up, Coach Turtle? I'm still trying to learn this technology. All right, so man, it looks like it's working. So I was trying to figure out, basically 2 mics go in, and there's 2 feeds of it, and so it used to get this like echo. And there's a way that I can actually turn off one of the feeds.
Oh yeah, I saw when Coach Turtle was on it.
Yeah, I can. And so anyway, long story short, I'm bringing up one other thing. We had a couple questions that people wanted to ask. I'm going to just keep that up so we can dive into that. But
oh, nice.
But man, first of all right, I can't find it right now. It's okay. So we're live. Awesome. I'm super, super excited to have the Reverend on. Man, we've had so many really awesome conversations over the past 2 years, I'd say. Right?
Yeah.
You're a student now. You were one of the Schaefer originals,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
I got to come up with like a really catchy name, like the Schaefer 6. Like, I don't know how many are there. Maybe there's 7, 6. I don't know how many are the originals that were here, but one of our original students,
the Schaefer Death Squad.
Yeah, the Schaefer.
I think that's been taken, right?
I think so. I think we're out of that one, but and we've had some really awesome conversations in the past, and some of those conversations have led to some pretty incredible things now, in my opinion, with some of the stuff that we're doing with Not On My Watch, which is a whole nother topic, whole nother different conversation that we're not going to dive into today. But, we've had conversations with obviously your background, your professional background in the church, and as a reverend, really talking about some of the similarities between faith and jiu-jitsu, and just also talking about faith in general. And so, man, I thought, this would be a great topic to do on the video podcast. And to be honest, we talked like before we went live, just really for like 30 seconds. And I think we're kind of both in this way, like, just let it go, like, let it be organic. Let's talk about it. Let's dive into some conversations, and see where it goes. And hopefully there's some valuable information that we can pull from this, or just some food for thought. So let's before we like kind of really dive in, I would love for students here and other people to kind of learn a little bit about your background. You don't have to dive super deep into your childhood, but if you want to just kind of give us a background childhood and into your professional career and everything else like that.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Washington State, right in the corner up by the Canadian border, little farm town. I was adopted when I was 2 into a Swedish American family, and we just happened to, the family I was adopted into happened to be in the process of becoming Mennonite, which is a really conservative tradition. And so I grew up Mennonite. I grew up in a small community, really tight-knit, genuine community. Some awesome things about that, some challenging things about that as well. as I grew up, I felt more and more confined in that space, like as in a faith wise. And so I decided to leave that community and kind of wandered for years, just wondering, being spiritual, but not really finding a home for that.
How old were you really at that point?
I was 16 when I decided to leave the Mennonite community.
And can you give me just a brief over what is Mennonite? Because I've never really heard of it. I don't know what it is.
So it's kind of, I hope this isn't offensive, but I grew up Mennonite, so it wouldn't be to me, but kind of Amish light.
Okay.
If you're looking from the outside, the community,
just small wooden stuff. No, just kidding.
No, but some of the older folks in our community, like white shirt, black, not using zippers, things like that, like really traditional.
Okay.
My parents were part of the younger generation and were more modern, but definitely some of the old school folks were like the beard and and really visually looked distinct, particular in that. And so I just didn't fit with me because I asked questions all the time. I was like, well, why do we have to do that? That was not the way that community rolled. So when I found a home in a Presbyterian church where they really valued at questioning and really using your mind to analyze and consider and ponder and wonder, I felt more at home in that way. So that part of the journey took me through. I built houses. I didn't go to college right out of high school. No one in my family had ever been to college, so it just wasn't a thing that we did. Although I loved to read, I loved considering and thinking about being academic. But it just didn't happen for me until after I got married. I went back to school, ended up going to the University of Washington in Seattle, thinking about nonprofit management and leadership. And I was going to go to law school for that. And in that process, had a great conversation with a dean of a law school out in New York. And he really challenged me to think about a different vocation trajectory. And so that's when I really started thinking about ministry and seminary. So I went back to Seattle and started working at my church in Seattle, and big Presbyterian church, like 5,000 members, 5,000 people on a Sunday, and pretty huge.
Whoa.
Yeah. In Seattle, which is like not a churchy city.
Yeah.
So it was a different culture. And in that process, ended up deciding and here kind of feeling like, maybe I'm called to doing this. So I ended up out back east at Princeton Theological Seminary, did my Master of Divinity there and loved it, had a great time, made a lot of friends, and thought deeply, philosophically, theologically for 3 years, was challenged to study the Bible, learn Hebrew, learn Greek, dig into big questions, and be prepared and equipped to be a pastor. So after that, I actually went back to the church in Seattle, served as a pastor there. And then after 5 years, moved back out to New Jersey. And
wait, so you came to New Jersey and then you went back and you came?
Again? I've done that cross-country trip two times.
Oh.
We're not going to make it a trifecta. Yeah. We're here. It's funny, like you were just telling me that story, and like what I'm really curious about is you said you had a great conversation with this professor or whatever, right? What was it that, because like we've had some of those conversations in life that are like life altering, because that's in my opinion, that's a life altering decision, right? Yeah, I talk about trajectory change.
Yeah,
like where are the places in your life where you look back and see you were headed steadfastly all in one direction, and something happened where you just took a step back and we're like, oh no, I can't do that. That's what it was a 2-hour conversation. I went in for an interview at the law school, and in the interview, the dean said, hey, let's consider the interview over, but would you be up for a conversation? I was like, sure. So we walked around the campus, and he just said, he told me his story of becoming an attorney and really not finding joy in it.
Yeah.
And fulfillment. And it wasn't until he was able to come into a position where he's working with people and affecting the lives of students that he found true vocation. And he just said, you'd probably make a great lawyer, but I bet you'd make an awesome social worker or pastor. Maybe you should consider that. And I was like, done deal. That's all I need. Because at that point I was kind of thinking, do I really want to go to law school? Do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
So it was kind of an out for me. And I'm glad I took it.
Yeah. That's awesome. And that's a huge thing. And I think so many of us probably go through those moments. And unfortunately, probably a lot of us don't necessarily, or never have that opportunity, or at least don't take the opportunity to really reflect and take a chance and dive into or change the trajectory towards something that really gives them deep, true fulfillment in life. And I definitely, I think, went through some of that in my life as well. And I know you've, obviously gone through that, and we've had those discussions on what makes a fulfilling life and being able to get there. And there's a lot of challenges involved always, and everything else. But so let's get to now, in that sense of your time in the church and in faith, and let's go back to 2 years ago when you stepped into Gracie Barra. What was the impetus for that?
I don't know if I'd call it midlife crisis.
Yeah.
But it was midlife. What in the world is going on in my life? Why have I accomplished a lot? Why do I have everything I set out to achieve? And I still have a sense of emptiness, or just a sense of, well, I ran the race I was told to run, and now I'm done with that, and I feel a little empty.
Yeah.
And so I vividly remember I was turning 45, and I was sitting on the couch watching TV, eating potato chips, getting bigger. In the moment I was doing that. And I thought, gosh, my whole family are athletes. My daughter was doing competitive gymnastics. My other daughter's is playing soccer. My wife's a competitive runner. And athletics had always been a huge part of my life, a place where I'd gotten a lot of joy and happiness, fulfillment, connection. And I wasn't doing anything. I hadn't run. I'd done half marathons and things like that in the past, and I'd stopped doing that. And I just was like unhappy. So I saw a Facebook post, Facebook marketing.
It works
for Gracie Barra. And I was like, oh man, I'd watched UFC, and I was intrigued with the cerebral strategic qualities of jiu-jitsu, and watching Hoist Gracie and, the story of like this unique martial art making a difference. And I thought, I'm going to try that. So I called and I signed up, and I went out, and I was at Schaefer and met Mike and Coach Wojtek, and I wish I could say it was like, oh, from day one I fell in love, and that was not the case, because I was winded within like 2 minutes. Even doing the warm-ups, I was like, man, the hill that I'm climbing is way bigger than I thought.
And you need to have a lot of motivation in that first week, right? Especially if you haven't been exercising, because those are going to be the hardest sessions, right? When your body's literally like that day was probably the hardest day for you. To move at all in general.
I like put your feet over your head in the warm-ups.
Oh yeah, that one.
No chance. Not even happening. To feel like I was so not good at something. It was less physical than it was like mental and humbling.
Yeah.
It really was. I was humbled and that didn't feel good. I was at a place where I think my ego was fragile enough that it didn't feel good to be humbled. And so I left and thought, I signed up. It was a miracle, I think, that I signed up.
Well, thank God you did. No pun intended either.
Yeah. And I came back, a few times, and then I didn't come back for a month. Got a little busy, and then I was like, okay, I'm either gonna start and stop this and continue this slide into depression or whatever, and I can't do that. I said, I'm just not going to choose that. I'm going to choose to go. So I went back, and I'll never forget Coach Turtle saying to me, he's like, you're uncomfortable. I can see it, but this is the place you become comfortable being uncomfortable. And that was it for me. I was like, that's what's uncommon about jiu-jitsu is you develop a sense of being uncomfortable, being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Right.
And that alone was bigger than those blue mats. That transcended every corner of my life. I needed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like we all talk about how many like life lessons and things we learn through jiu-jitsu. To me, that is probably the biggest, and it falls under that growth mindset and knowing that nothing's going to change or improve in your life unless you learn to start being comfortable being uncomfortable, which feeds into embracing failure, being super self-aware and knowing that, like you say, not having an ego with things and understanding that process and being able to put in the time and effort to endure through the really early period of time when it's really difficult and then starting to see those changes. It was clear to me at some point, and I can't even remember exactly when it was, that we're like, oh, David caught the bug.
Yeah.
Like, and then you started putting out like a blog on Faith and Jiu Jitsu. And so tell me like a little bit on how you started to really take those two concepts and see a lot of those similarities.
Well, I think at that time, I really was looking for something. I'd been a pastor. I'm an ordained Presbyterian minister, a reverend, and serving in a church in a congregation that I enjoyed and had worked, to gain my education to do that and to be set up to do it. And it was good. It really was a good situation. It was good for my family, and it's what I wanted. Yet I still, at that point, I was still maybe coming into a space in my life where it wasn't hitting all the marks for me. And when I jumped on the mats at jiu-jitsu, I saw this place accomplishes a lot of the things that I'd heard or I'd believed could happen in a faith congregation and didn't happen. Just for some reason, the power or the reality of it was falling short. Yet when I jumped onto the mats, there was a deeper sense of community, vulnerability, sense of belief and hope, a vision for what could be. Mm-hmm. All these things that I'd leaned into in church vocation and was kind of wondering, why aren't these things happening? Why isn't it clicking? Mm-hmm. When I got on the mats, it started clicking. Mm. And I don't think that's an indictment of the entire institution of the church, although the institution of the church is having a change. It's being challenged. The identity of what church is being challenged in our culture. Yeah. And I think that's good. But for me personally, I think it was being refined in me. You can hope for something and work for it and go all in and see the power that it has to connect people together. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be in a brick building with stained glass. As long as there's a community forming around something that has transcendent power, you can live into your vocation in this space. So I just started writing on it. I had conversations on the mats after rolling with folks that were deep. They were asking theological questions. Well, what's it mean about this? What's it mean? I had people in the school talking to me about struggles in marriage life or being a parent or those things. All the things that I'd been trained to do as a pastor, I was having those experiences on the mats. It just was in a different way.
Yeah.
And it seemed, because it was outside of like my day job, there seemed to be a real pure quality to it.
Yeah.
So I started writing about it, places where I saw transcendence and community and connection, belief and hope all coming together on the mats. And things started to resonate more and more in that.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And your blogs have been super insightful and thought-provoking. And so, like, for me personally, I would say that I'm not somebody that is very religious. And for quite some time, I'm going to say I'm a skeptic, but I was kind of a skeptic. And I think it's part of my upbringing in that, so my father's Roman Catholic, born and raised in Italy. And in fact, went to school at a church, and it was one of those stories where he's lefty and the nuns wouldn't let him write lefty. Like literally they would beat his hand and smack his hand, and he had to learn to write righty. It was like one of those things. Now this is like, late 1940s, early 50s Italy, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it was a different
school.
Talk about old school. By the way, my brother Jacopo, who was born there, was the doctor that gave birth to my brother that was handling it. He was smoking a cigarette while he was handling
drinking a scotch, smoking a cigarette. All right, let's deliver this one.
This is a true story, right? So like lots changed in the past 30 years, 40 years. But anyway, father's Roman Catholic, my mother's Jewish.
Yeah. And
so we grew up in a household where, and really what my parents decided was, and I don't know if this is like kind of the standard thing, because I don't know if there's any standard, but, sometimes they take the mother's, whatever, if there's a separate, usually maybe they go the way that the mother does. Not always, though that's not totally true, I guess. But so they decided that we were going to be bar mitzvahed. But lucky for me, we would still celebrate Christmas.
Nice.
So
best of both worlds.
Yeah. So I would get my Hanukkah presents, and we'd celebrate Hanukkah. We'd light the menorah, and we had a Christmas tree in the house, and we'd celebrate Christmas. And like Easter, we didn't do anything crazy. We kind of recognized it. And then even just from a Judaism standpoint, we went to temple like twice a year. We were what we call convenient Jews, right? And I think it's out of just basically guilt that my mother felt like we had to go and do it, but my father was totally into it. He never had a problem with it. And so, growing up in a household with two different religions and just not being all in on one or the other, it just was not something that was a big part of my life. And then the other thing that I really feel like happened to me is growing up, man, I think in general, like anti-Semitism is pretty prevalent, and it's prevalent in a very casual way too. And this is for a lot of other people that I feel like, that are, other groups that are also like marginalized. Right. But, people would, and even some of my friends and stuff, like I just always felt like ashamed to say that I was Jewish. Like it was kind of less than I was, because there's socialization of Jews in the world was never like a really positive thing. It's kind of like a negative thing. And so I just always felt like we were less than when I'd say I was Jewish. And then the other thing that's interesting would happen a lot is because of, our culture, my family is very Italian. My father is Italian speaking. We have an Italian last name. So people don't think to ask. They don't realize that I'm Jewish. Yeah. And so they'd say things. And this has gone up through childhood, up through my professional life. There's many people I've worked with that, we're in a car together driving, and they, we're talking about something, and they start saying something about it. I'm like, you don't know that I'm Jewish, are you? Yeah. So I try not to be awkward about it in that sense. But so what I'm getting at in all of this is, I never really looked at religion in a way that I never connected with religion for the most part. And one major way that I definitely didn't connect was with just the supernatural aspect and the belief in that of, this person's God is the one that they say created life and everything else. First of all, religion versus science is a whole nother conversation that I fall on the side of science for the most part. And then I'm like, well, how do you reconcile all these religions and all that other stuff? So I just never bought into that. But when I started doing jiu-jitsu and I started understanding really the value of community and everything else that you just spoke about, and when you and I started talking about it more, and kind of really seeing the connection and why people gravitate towards religion and faith, and looking at this, at the end of the day, from my observation, is it's giving people guidance and a pathway on how to live a good, happy, meaningful life, right? That's at least my observation. And so then when I started to see it that way, I'm like, man, religion is, I get it. Like I totally get it. And so it's been an eye-opener for me. Jiu-jitsu has helped me understand the value of religion in our world. But the other thing too that I think has been happening is how it's changing. So I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about like your observations of how religion has kind of evolved over the past 20, 30 years.
Yeah, well, I think it's longer than that. It's
right.
It's a long story. No, it's great. I love hearing that. And I have to give a shout out to Dr. Miroslav Volf, who's given me some language around this. And so the way you've described it, I would describe using the word flourishing, human flourishing, where, and he uses description of where humans flourish the most. If you're a spiritual person, then that's the presence of the divine. And that's where, if you're inclined to faith, that's where you can name and say, where you see human flourishing happening at its most core, you might understand the fingerprints of God, no matter what tradition you're in.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of Christian pastor who doesn't always fit in this. I don't paint by numbers. So I think if someone, in my role now as a chaplain too, if someone is of a different faith tradition or whatever, I want to help them grow in their tradition. Right. I'm not one to say, well, Christianity is the only way.
Right. And I appreciate that, by the way. You've never, ever, ever, which is one thing that I really admire about you. You've never, ever pushed anything on anyone, ever. Like, you'd never even talk about it.
It's just my journey. And this is one thing why jiu-jitsu was, for me, is, I described this dean of a law school and then Coach Turtle offering something to me that provided trajectory change. When you make yourself vulnerable, when you say, okay, I will allow myself to step into this and trust that when I make myself vulnerable, connect to someone else and allow them to have input into my life, I trust I will be better off.
That's amazing.
It doesn't always work.
Right.
But that it does at times. And you can, and for me, I have these islands of faith where I can name different places in my life where I've seen, okay, I'm going to take a step out and risk, and not in a supernatural way, because I don't believe supernatural either.
Yeah.
I'm a science guy.
Yeah.
I think understanding scripture, sacred text, Bible, Quran, Tanakh, you have to understand context and history and literature to really hear what's being said. A lot of people will take those sacred texts and use them to wield power over someone. That's, if anyone does that, if anyone does that to you in faith, run away.
Yeah.
Don't trust it. Run away.
Yeah.
Because I think, getting back to the how has church changed? I think theologically, as I was trained, their faith does this. It's about justification, sanctification, and vocation. Justification. Am I loved? Am I worthy? Am I okay? Is God going to love me? Am I accepted? So many, when we talk about Christianity, so many people talking about is like, you have to accept Jesus. You have to accept Christianity to be in. like that's the gatekeeping thing that some people are in or some people are out.
Yeah.
I don't view that. Couldn't be further from how faith works. It's about the divine showing love and connection and willingness to be with. So that's justification. So, and I believe that God, this cosmic force in the world, has said cosmically yes to humanity. I love you. You are beloved. You are worthy of care. I will stand in that place. So that's justification.
And just to, not to totally cut you off, but that I think probably helps so many people that have issues with themselves and self-worth.
Yeah.
So that just what you were saying now, I'm like, man, the value of that, of just that message relayed properly is like an amazing gift that people can give to themselves. At least say, okay, if they believe, at least I know God loves me, believes in me, man, like, because I don't believe in myself a lot of times.
Yeah.
Right?
When I talk about a frail ego, that's one reason I'm probably Christian is I believe in grace, because my ego has been fractured in life.
Yeah.
And to have it be built back by a loving environment and the love and care that I've received in my own faith, that's been powerful to me. So I get that personally. So that's justification. Well, sanctification is just, okay, now that I understand this powerful love in my life, what do I do with it? How do I grow in it? How do I start to make changes that make a difference in the way I am? And so that's justification, sanctification. And then the next thing is vocation. Now that I'm becoming this new person, being transformed, what's my role in the world? Where's the greatest need that the world has with my greatest passion and gifts? Where's the intersection of that?
Yeah.
That's vocation. Well, so the church, I think, over history has budged into the space of justification and sanctification and commodified it and said, we're going to treat this as a product that we sell to adherents. We're going to say, we're the ones who steward this. And if you do these right things and pay this amount of money, we'll give this to you.
Yeah.
And then they never get to vocation because it's all about the business model. If I could go, if I had a time machine. I was
about to say the vocation part to me is like what every person that has a job, like, and that's like the final piece of really leading to a meaningful life. Is finding a vocation that has meaning, that your passions and your abilities all line up. It's like when we talk about even helping within a team in an organization, it's like finding out like what you like to do, what you're good at. And like, if you can like merge those two together, you can find a position that fulfills those two. You're going to be a rock star. You're going to thrive. You're going to flourish. As you say.
Yeah. You're going to thrive, not survive.
And you're right. I've never heard or seen any religion. And that part of that is just ignorance on my part that really dives into that and pushes that and has structure around that. And imagine if it did. I mean, gosh, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think as soon as it started to get structure, we'd figure out a way to mess it up. So then we'd have to move on. So I think we're in this time. I think we're in seminary, we call it a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
I think we're in this time of distilling out this commodification where the church is not going to be a business model institution. I think we're being challenged to think about life and community in different ways.
Yeah.
Where we get out of I think God's space is justification, sanctification. I have I can give language around that. I can describe how that looks, but I have no part in that. I don't have power in that. Therefore, I can't use that power to wield over anyone or to commodify in that. My job as someone who's part of the church is to stand at the crossroads of justification, sanctification, and vocation and point people to say, wow, this new person you're becoming, this best version of yourself who you're becoming, I see needs over here. You should stand right here and be who you are, and you will make a difference in the world. That, I think, is where a vibrant life of faith begins. When you begin to understand, maybe I'm not perfect. I need to grow. I need to be honest with myself. I can't BS myself. I can't look in the mirror and say I'm different when I'm not. I have to look in the mirror and say I'm not fully formed into the person I want to be or believe I can be. The only way to do that is standing on a firm foundation of understanding who I am, sober truth of the reality. And then to say, am I happy with this or not? No. Well, I have some work to do. And to do that best, I need a community. So you can see the connections that I make in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Those are all the same things that I've experienced. So when I was at church, I was on. It was the loneliest place in the world for me because I was facilitating and working hard to facilitate this community for people. And I was on the outside. I was at my work. I was on my job. So when I came into jiu-jitsu, I was one of the congregation. I was one of the flock.
Right.
I got to be built up. I got to be encouraged.
You're
and
working
supported.
on yourself.
Yeah. And so it was awesome. So, and I think so many of us pour out. We're not working on ourselves as parents or in jobs or all those things. And it creates deficit in our life.
Big time.
Jiu-jitsu and the mats and the community, the intimacy that comes from that space is filling. And it helps. I think what for me it's done is it's got me on my feet, and it said, okay, you're not perfect. You still have work to do. I call my my ego. I've lost 35 pounds of my ego since I started. I probably got about 35 pounds left to do that. But that's what it is. That's the journey of this, is becoming more whole.
You were everything you were just saying before about that aspect of religion and getting into that next phase. I'm like, that's phase one, self-awareness, finding authenticity, right? All those things. And identifying, who I am, what are the things that I do well, what are the things that I don't, what does my best version look like? And then the next question is, okay, how am I getting there? I need a vehicle to get there. Most of us can't do that on our own. It's like, it does take community. It does take guidance from somebody who's walked that path to somebody, or at least can facilitate that. And you're right. Like, what are the structures out there that can really do that? Yeah. Obviously the church, I understand is, but I see where there's some missing pieces as well, because like, let's be honest, like, most of us work there, we fill our day with some time doing something, right? Mm-hmm. And to be able to align that with all of the things that we want and that we're passionate about and that we're good at, it takes work and guidance and community and everything else. And it's really fascinating to me. And like I said, for me, just over the past 2 years, starting to see those similarities has been really, really eye-opening. So I've just had like a newfound understanding and respect for religion in general, and which has just been enlightening for me. But so got some questions people asked. So I remember one question that we had here, and I remember off the top of my head, was from I think it was like Ron about how to managing, work, life, and religion, like balancing all those things and how putting them all together. Do you have any thoughts or anything that you would love to kind of hear? He says, we'd love to hear David's thoughts on balancing faith, family, work, and jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's a lot. And so the word balance, whenever I hear that, I cringe, because balance is impossible. It's not sustainable. Think about that. Stand on one foot, and how long can you live your life on one foot? No. You can't have balance. So faith has shown me that rhythm is possible I like that. And sustainable. Balance works for a while, and it's helpful to learn how to balance and do that. And you need that, but that's not sustainable. Rhythm is sustainable. You figure out, okay, and in faith life, you have a rhythm, you have Sabbath. So if Sabbath is Saturday or Sunday for you, that day where you mark your week, here's the end of my week, here's the start of my week. So that's rhythm. Every 7 days, there's a reset. That's awesome. Because if your week was terrible last week, sweet, push the reset. I got a brand new week to do this. There's rhythm in that. The seasons, most faith traditions have celebrations or festivals to mark seasons. We're coming up on Thanksgiving. There's a rhythm to that. I think I've learned in my faith life that it's okay to live rhythmically. There are times I'm not at jiu-jitsu as much. And I'm, even in 2 years, I'm learning how to let up on myself for that. I get annoyed or frustrated, or I feel like I'm going to let down the coaches, let you down. The reality is sometimes I got to take my kids to soccer, and you know what? That's going to be a bigger priority for me on a lot of Saturdays. Now, there's sometimes when I've negotiated with my wife. She's awesome. She's so supportive. She has her things. She runs marathons, so she trains a lot. We say, okay, how do we manage our priorities? If you're going to do this and I want to do this, what works for us? I'm not going to commit to anything that doesn't work for me and Kristen, because that's a priority, So I set that first, and then it's like, okay, how can I be a good husband? How can I be a good dad? But knowing when I do jiu-jitsu, I'm a better husband. When I do jiu-jitsu, I'm a better dad. So prioritizing that is a big deal. And having that conversation, and Kristen sees it. She knows I'm going to be more available if I've just done class and done live training. I'm going to have a hop in my step the rest of the day. Yeah. So it's about priorities and communication, not trying to weasel out to go do my thing. That I've never done that when I go to jiu-jitsu, but I have said, do you want the best version of me? Then we need to commit to this. And then I need to commit to that for her as well.
It's funny that you say that. And we just had Amy on, and we talked from a mental health standpoint about that work-life balance, and it's all the same stuff. Right. And so like why I bring that up is like, it's like a ding, 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 like big flag goes up. Got like everyone pay attention. Like I know that we fall into these habits of falling, I say not out of balance, but falling out of rhythm, and feeling guilty about going to jiu-jitsu or going to the gym or having some time for yourself. But we talk, just echoing those sentiments. You have to do it. I mean, this is number one, your body needs it. Yeah. Your mind needs it. But in order to do that, you're right. It has to be communication with your significant other, and they have to be able to do that as well. If that's out of balance and they never get to carve out time because you're always busy, or you're being selfish, right? And your marriage is probably going to suffer from that. And it's not, and your outlook on things and your whole balance and rhythm is, I keep using the word balance. I'm going to use rhythm. I love that. Is going to be out of whack forever. So I think that's solid advice that I hope people take.
And it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm leaving jiu-jitsu to go play 18 holes of golf, and then I'm going to grab a beer with my buddies.
Right.
That's not what Saturday looks like for me.
Right, of course.
It really is. Kristen goes on a run. We figure out who's taking the kids where. I do class. Sometimes I get to stay and roll. Other times I got to head out, but it works. And it's really helpful that she's prioritized that for me too. Yeah. She wants me to be healthy. Yeah. The great thing is 4 years ago, she knew I was not happy. She sees me today and she's able to say, jiu-jitsu has helped you be a happier, better version of yourself.
Yeah. That's great. Any other thoughts on your mind about faith, whether it's related to jiu-jitsu or not, or any messages or things that you want to give to any listeners who are, who are regular goers to church, or whether they're Muslim or, it doesn't matter. Obviously, we're talking obviously just with the church now, but what's really one of the other beautiful things about jiu-jitsu that I love is, the mats are blind in that way. And they teach you to be blind. And I anybody who goes to a school will tell you, and it's, to me, it's always, it's an example of how we all, I do believe we're all really good people at the end of the day, because jiu-jitsu in my mind debunks this idea that of yes, no, there's racism out there. That's not what I'm saying, but it's really usually at the end of the day, racism and anti-Semitism and everything else is based on fear.
Yeah.
And it's based on, I think, people not being their best selves, not being self-aware and authentic. And jiu-jitsu just seems to be one of those things that breaks down those barriers and those walls. Yeah. It brings out that humility and authenticity. And it allows you to see people for who they are and not ever care. I couldn't care less ever. It's never mattered, and I just love seeing the spectrum of gender, of religion, of ethnicity, whatever it is. And it's so anyway, I went off on a tangent.
No, it's great. Yeah. That's something that I really wanted to address too, because I am a minority. I'm a Native American. I grew up in a white culture, was always on the margins. Even at church, and they say, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it truly is like demographically true, but the most segregated time in the United States is on Sunday morning when people are in church, because when you make yourself vulnerable, you're going to choose to be around people you feel comfortable and most comfortable with. And a lot of times that just exposes our racial, ethnic divides.
Yeah.
Like you said, when you go on jiu-jitsu mat, everywhere I've gone. I love visiting jiu-jitsu places wherever I go. When I was in Greece, when I go to California, when Seattle, different place, San Diego, you walk onto any of those jiu-jitsu mats and it's a spectrum of people. And I think in the church, in religion, in jiu-jitsu, in life, it's about relationships. It really is about relationships. It's simple, but it's hard and complex.
Right. Because we're complex individual,
Anytime, one person when you have to manage one person, it's hard enough when you manage yourself.
Right.
But then you start bringing groups of people together, it becomes more and more complex. And so it might be natural for people to feel it's easier if you're just in one ethnic group. It's not. That's a fallacy. I think jiu-jitsu is something that demonstrates that. And it's about ego, and it's about humility. It's about acceptance, and it's about honoring the humanity in the other. And I think if you don't find that in your religion, it's not good.
Right.
It's not beautiful. It's not pure. It doesn't reflect that core love that I was talking about. So I talk about skepticism. I'd be a skeptic of that tradition.
Yeah. Do you feel like religious institutions contribute to that divisiveness in the country?
Yeah. I feel like, when I talked about commodification, that's about gathering and maintaining power. And anytime you do that, you begin to live in hierarchy as opposed to what I call shalom or salam or a wholeness, which is a circle. When you're deeply connected to someone else, you can't live in hierarchy and live connected to someone else. You have to live in equality to do that.
Talk about marriage, right? Like there's no way. And I mean, not to go off on that topic, but even I'd say how marriages were socialized, or how we thought about marriage in the past, of like the woman serves the man, right? And that whole mindset. And that also goes into, we're not going to go into it, I promise, just, the topic of manhood and healthy masculinity, but that institution and the way people kind of were taught, this is how a marriage looks, obviously is like the least bit conducive to what wholeness, you're talking about.
Sure. And patriarchy is a huge part of that. And it's unfortunately been a huge part of the story of religion. And that's perpetrated. I do think it's perpetrated that. And I have tons of friends who are Native Americans, and they've asked me, how can you be Christian? That's the religion of the colonizer, and I'm not that. I'm connecting to the transcendent person that I believe God is. And this tradition has given me language to make sense of that.
Yeah.
And so I just live in the sensibility of it, always seeking that connection. And then I've developed ways to say that this isn't what I want this to be. If it's disconnecting me from if it's not allowing me to be true to myself, if it goes away from that thesis of love,
yeah,
I don't believe in it.
Yeah. That's the beautiful thing about all of this, is that you make it what you want it to be. You take from it what you believe in and you connect with, and you don't have to embrace it all. You don't have to, and I love that. And the way that you explained it before, that breakdown of the justification and the
sanctification
and the vocation, and just that, and just starting with the loving and that entity that's believing in you and loving you, man, like that is transcendent in and of itself. You could take that concept and apply it probably to any religion, right? And again, you can apply that to even jiu-jitsu to some degree. I'm not sitting here comparing jiu-jitsu to religion or saying it's on the same level, but at the end of the day, it's these themes, or it's these thoughts that don't have to be tied to one particular institution, but that are the elements and the ingredients to what I feel like is human flourishing, is what you're saying, right? At the end of the day.
When I look at it like this, if I was just coming in to learn a technique, I could do that.
Right.
But if I come in and I know I'm connecting, and the person, I've come to trust Coach Turtle and Coach Wojtek and you and the other folks who are there. When I learn it, and I know when Turtle corrects me, it's because he wants me to be better.
Yeah.
When Turtle says good job, I know he doesn't give that out without thought. I trust him. There's credibility there. And it's the same thing in religion. When you've worked to build that credibility, then the words you share that are authentic have much more meaning, and there's a connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's that reminds me of the book that we talk about a lot, Leadership from the Inside Out, and it talks about the 3 components to great leaders. And great leaders can be anyone, and you don't have to be the CEO, you don't have to be at the top of the org chart. A leader can be anyone at any time. And the 3 components of that was, one is self-awareness and finding authenticity. So great leaders are authentic. Yeah. Great leaders are authentic and then have influence over others because they're authentic. Yeah. Because people can see that there's a relationship, and they're able to more easily communicate and have influence over those people, not in a control way, but in a way of meaningful communication and dialogue that people understand what they're asking. Yeah. And the last is servitude. Mm-hmm. So it all lines up, at the end of the day, you pull all these pieces together.
It's universal.
And that's what I love about this. And that's why I think you've really helped me reconcile with the understanding of religion in general, at least the way that you talk about it, and the value that it has in somebody's life. I'm sure that every institution is not exactly the same. Some, may, like you said, it may be more like commoditizing, or, maybe a little bit. So there's fits for everyone or not, but those timeless kind of transcendent themes, I think, are so impactful and significant and wonderful. And it's been awesome. I really enjoyed it. Awesome. Well, man, we've already eaten up like an hour of time. So
awesome.
I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. And there's so much more we can talk about for sure. So many other topics. So I'm sure you need to know that to be prepared to come on again. We're going to do this again soon. And if you guys have any other questions, obviously ever about religion, just you got to roll with David first.
You got to deal with my top pressure.
You got to deal with his top pressure first, the Panda Jiu Jitsu. And then you guys have a conversation after when you're all sweaty. And actually, that's really the best
That's
time.
the best.
Is it not to
Nah, it's
keep
church.
talking?
That's church
like,
right there.
There's
man.
something about, there's, first of all, there's a physiological explanation to it, but people call it like the runner's high or whatever, but it's that post rolling, endorphins have kicked in, you've exerted all your energy and you're just at such peace.
Yep.
Possibly dehydration, but you're at peace. And there's just such great conversations that come on and that are after rolling. We're just sitting on the mats and
you've blown away boundaries. You've blown away the boundaries between yourself and someone.
Yeah.
It's
awesome stuff. Well, thanks again, man. And again, you guys ever have any questions, you know where to find them, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks. Let's see this. Let me turn this bad boy off. We're at 55 minutes. Long